Gave my SIL a key to my family's vacation home so she could visit anytime, but she started showing up without telling me, then demanded I cancel my annual family gathering because she wanted the house to herself. So, I am in a weird situation and I need help. I own a beautiful vacation home that has been in my family for generations. It originally belonged to my grandmother, who cherished it deeply and created many wonderful memories there. When she passed away, the house was passed down to my mother, who took great care of it and kept it as a special getaway for our family. Unfortunately, 3 years ago, my mother lost her battle with cancer, and the house was left to me. Since I am an only child, there were no siblings to share it with, so the responsibility and privilege of keeping it in the family fell entirely on me. Now that I'm married to my husband, Richard, this vacation home has continued to be an important part of our lives. We've taken our daughter there many times over the years, making our own beautiful memories in a place that already holds so much family history. Whenever we get the chance, we pack up and escape to this peaceful retreat, soaking in the nostalgia and the serenity it offers. Over time, Richard and I have worked on updating the house, making renovations and redesigning different parts to better fit our style and needs. While we've modernized some aspects, we've also made sure to preserve its charm and the sentimental value it holds for me. One of the times we visited, we brought Richard's sister along with us. She had never been there before, and from the moment she arrived, she completely fell in love with the place. It's easy to see why, since it's tucked away in a quiet, scenic countryside, far from the noise and rush of everyday life. The house has a huge backyard, perfect for relaxing or hosting gatherings, and a stunning pool that makes hot summer days so much more enjoyable. It's the kind of place that feels like a hidden gem, where time slows down and life feels simpler. Over the years, my sister-in-law has mentioned to me multiple times how lucky I am to have inherited such a beautiful vacation home. She's always expressed how much she wishes she had something like it, a place filled with happy memories, passed down through generations. For some context, both my husband, Richard, and his sister had a very difficult childhood. Their parents struggled with severe drug addiction and were in and out of jail throughout their lives. Because of this instability, Richard and his sister were placed in foster care at a young age. They never had a stable home to call their own, constantly moving between different foster homes, never knowing what the future held. It was a tough way to grow up, filled with uncertainty and hardship. Despite everything he went through, Richard worked incredibly hard to build a better life for himself. As soon as he secured a stable job, he made a life-changing decision. He adopted his younger sister and brought her to live with him. He didn't want her to go through life alone or suffer any more than she already had. In many ways, he became more than just a brother to her. He was her protector, her provider, and the closest thing she had to a parent. Because of this, their bond remains incredibly strong to this day. They've been through so much together, and no matter what, they always have each other's backs. When I first met Richard, he was very open about his difficult childhood. He told me about the struggles he and his sister had faced growing up, the instability, the foster homes, and the lack of a real family structure. But what stood out the most was the deep bond he shared with his sister. She wasn't just his sibling, she was someone he had practically raised and taken care of. They had been through everything together, and it was clear that she meant the world to him. Because of this, when I first came into the picture, his sister wasn't exactly welcoming. It took her some time to adjust to me. Richard was the only real family she had, and she was extremely protective of him. At first, she kept her distance and wasn't particularly friendly. In fact, she was often dismissive, not even bothering to call me by my name. I'll admit, it was tough in the beginning. There were moments when she could be quite mean, and I could sense that she was testing me in her own way. But I didn't take it personally because I understood where she was coming from. She had spent her whole life relying on Richard, and the idea of someone new coming in and potentially changing their dynamic must have been scary for her. But as time went on, things started to shift. She began to notice just how much Richard loved me, how serious we actually were, and how happy I made him. Slowly, she warmed up to me, and our relationship started to change for the better. Over the years, the three of us have grown incredibly close. Since Richard and his sister don't have any other relatives, and I don't have siblings of my own, it's really just the three of us. That's why, when my sister-in-law expressed sadness over never having received any kind of family inheritance, it really stuck with me. She had never been given anything from her biological family, no heirlooms, no childhood home, no sentimental treasures passed down through generations. I could tell that, deep down, it hurt her. After thinking about it, I made a decision and decided to give her a key to my family's vacation home. I told her that she was family to me, and because of that, I was completely fine with her coming over to the house. I reassured her that she could visit whenever she wanted, as long as she gave me a heads up first so that our schedules wouldn't clash. SIL was overjoyed, practically bursting with excitement, and eagerly agreed to the arrangement, promising to always check in before planning a visit. At first, my sister-in-law was respectful of our agreement. She would always call me before making any plans to visit the vacation home, just like we had discussed. But then, last year, things started to change. The first time she broke our agreement, I found out when I received a notification from my security camera of the vacation house. When I checked the footage, I was surprised to see that she was at the house. She hadn't mentioned anything to me beforehand. I immediately called her to ask what was going on. She apologized, saying she hadn't meant any harm and had simply forgotten to let me know. She promised that moving forward, she would always check in with me before visiting. I decided to take her word for it and let it slide, assuming it was just a one-time mistake. But then, not long after, she did it again. This time, it wasn't just an unannounced visit, she had brought someone with her. When I checked the security footage, I saw a man I had never seen before. Neither Richard nor I had any idea who he was. At this point, I was frustrated. I called her again and reminded her that we had a simple rule: just let me know before coming over. It wasn't about controlling when she could visit, but rather about making sure our schedules didn't clash. As it turned out, Richard and I had actually been planning to go to the house that very same weekend, and if she had just called, we could have worked something out before. Instead of understanding my frustration, she brushed it off like it was nothing. She casually told me that she was just too excited to spend time with her man and didn't really plan ahead. It quickly became clear that she had taken this mystery man there for what seemed like a romantic weekend getaway. Despite my irritation, I decided to let it go again. I didn't want to turn it into a bigger issue than it already was. But deep down, it left a bad taste in my mouth. I had given her that key as a gesture of love and trust, and she was starting to take advantage of it. However, when Richard and I visited the vacation house the following weekend, right after my sister-in-law's little getaway, I was completely unprepared for what I walked into. The moment I stepped inside, I could tell something was off. The house, which I had always taken pride in keeping clean and welcoming, was in complete disarray. The floors were sticky, like someone had spilled drinks everywhere and never bothered to wipe them up. The trash bin was overflowing with empty alcohol bottles, evidence of what had clearly been a party-like atmosphere. But the worst part was the bedroom. It was a complete mess. The bed was unkempt, the sheets were all over the place, and the whole room had an air of carelessness, as if no effort had been made to tidy up even slightly. I was absolutely furious. It wasn't just that the place was messy, it was the sheer disrespect of it all. She had left the house in this state without even bothering to call and inform me. She had knowingly walked away, fully aware that I would eventually be the one to find it. The realization hit me hard. She had clearly taken my kindness for granted. I immediately called her, barely able to keep my anger in check. I asked her outright who did she think was going to clean up after her? I had come to the vacation house expecting a peaceful weekend, only to be greeted by a disaster that I now had to deal with. Instead of owning up to it, she casually said that she had simply forgotten to clean and then had the audacity to tell me that since we were family, she didn't think I would be so offended by how dirty everything was. That was the last straw for me. I made it very clear to her that this behavior was unacceptable to me. I warned her that if she ever planned to visit again, she needed to inform me first, otherwise, she was no longer welcome. My voice was firm, and for the first time, I didn't sugarcoat my frustration. For the next few hours, instead of unwinding as I had planned, I found myself scrubbing floors, taking out garbage, and restoring the house back to its normal state. Richard helped out too. Only after all that exhausting work could we finally sit down and relax. All these incidents started to change the way I saw my sister-in-law. I was starting to see her in a different light. She wasn't just making small mistakes, but she was taking advantage of my generosity, assuming I would always just deal with the consequences. And that realization stung. This weekend is supposed to be special. Every year, my side of the family gathers in honor of my mom to celebrate her life. It's a tradition we've kept going since she passed away, a way to remember her and cherish the bond we all share. My dad, my grandfather, and some of my close cousins all come together at someone's place, and we just enjoy each other's company. This year, I was excited to host it at my family's vacation home. Richard and I had been planning it for weeks, making sure everything would be perfect. But today, just one day before the gathering, my phone buzzed with a security notification. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what it meant. When I checked the camera feed, my worst suspicion was confirmed: my sister-in-law was at the vacation house again. And, of course, she hadn't bothered to ask me. This time, she had even brought along 2 of her girlfriends. Normally, I would call her, scold her for not informing me, and then reluctantly let it slide. But this time was different. This wasn't just another random weekend where I could push my frustration aside. I had plans. Important ones. Plans that involved my family, my traditions, and honoring my mother. And now, my sister-in-law had once again inserted herself into my space without permission. I didn't hesitate. I called her immediately, demanding to know why she had shown up without telling me again. She responded that she had just come out of a 1-month relationship and needed some time to process her trauma. As if that somehow justified barging into my family home, unannounced, one day before a major event I had been planning for weeks. She said she would have informed me, just after she and her friends had already settled in. According to her, she assumed it wouldn't be a problem for me. Anyways, at that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't an innocent mistake. This was entitlement. She knew she was supposed to ask. She knew this house belonged to me. And yet, she had deliberately ignored that, assuming that whatever she wanted to do would take priority over my plans, my boundaries, and my generosity. I firmly told her that Richard and I would be arriving tomorrow. I explained that this weekend was my annual family gathering, something we did every year in honor of my mother. I pointed out to her that we had been planning to host it at my family's vacation house for weeks, and that she should have asked before showing up unannounced. However, despite my frustration, I still tried to be accommodating. I told her that if she and her girlfriends wanted to really stay at my house, then they were more than welcome to join the gathering. After all, I didn't want to kick her out just for the sake of it. But the moment I suggested this, her attitude shifted completely. She immediately refused, making it clear that she had no interest in being part of our event. Instead of acknowledging that she had overstepped, she doubled down and argued that I wasn't being fair. According to her, she needed this weekend to unwind with her girlfriends, and having my family there would ruin her time. Then, as if she had any right to make demands, she actually had the nerve to suggest that I should be the one to change my plans. She insisted that I either move the date of my family gathering or find a different location to host it so that she and her friends wouldn't be disturbed. I was stunned. The entitlement was unreal. Here she was, in a house she did not own, a house she was only allowed to visit because of my generosity, telling me, the actual owner, to rearrange my plans because she had decided, last minute, that she wanted a private getaway. At that moment, any lingering patience I had left for her completely disappeared. This was blatant disrespect, and I had officially reached my breaking point. I told her, plain and simple, that I wasn't going to ask my family members to rearrange their schedules just because she had shown up unannounced and decided she wanted the house to herself. If she wanted an uninterrupted getaway with her friends, then she needed to find her own accommodations and fast because Richard and I were arriving tomorrow no matter what. That's when she completely lost it. She started arguing furiously, her tone dripping with frustration and self-pity. She accused me of being inconsiderate, acting as if I was the one imposing on her plans when, in reality, she was the one who had barged into my space without permission. Then, as if trying to guilt-trip me into backing down, she dramatically claimed that I was ruining her plans and that she needed this weekend as a mental health getaway. At that point, I had heard enough. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into feeling bad for standing my ground. Yes, I understood that she had been through a lot in her life. Yes, I knew that she was hurting over her breakup even though she had been with the guy just for a month. But none of that gave her the right to demand that I change my plans or to act like my generosity is something she is entitled to. She is acting like she owns the place. And I am officially done putting up with it. Ida? Update 1. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who has shared their thoughts on my situation, although some of you are just plain harsh. Reading through your advice is giving me the confidence to finally set the boundary that I should be enforcing. For everyone asking, SIL has always been a bit entitled, although I have always let it slide, for the sake of my husband. For example, back when Richard and I got married, she threw a mini tantrum about how she should have been my maid of honor. She made a big deal about how she deserved a special role because she was his only family. When I gently told her that I had already chosen someone else, she sulked and gave me the cold shoulder for weeks. And there have been multiple times when she would invite herself over for dinner without notice, then complain about what I cooked. One time, she even joked that since she never had a real mom, I should take on that role and cook for her more often. So yeah, the entitlement was always there. But despite her selfish tendencies, I let things slide because I wanted to keep the peace. I also kept making excuses for her because I felt bad for her upbringing, and want her to feel like she has a family. But family isn't just about giving, it's also about respect. And the hard truth is, she isn't respecting me, my home, or my generosity. For anyone else struggling with setting boundaries, let this be a reminder: being kind does not mean being a doormat. You can love someone and still say no to them. You can want the best for them and still refuse to let them take advantage of you. As for my sister-in-law, I haven't decided yet what to do next, but I do know one thing for sure: this is the last time she walks all over me. Update 2. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more ridiculous, my husband called me from work a few minutes ago. Apparently, my sister-in-law decided to take her complaint straight to him, whining like a toddler about how I was evicting a struggling family member and being insensitive to her mental health struggles. I could practically hear the frustration in Richard's voice as he explained what was happening. He wasn't buying into her dramatics, either. In fact, he was just as upset as I was. He agreed that she had no business showing up at our place without asking first and that her behavior was completely out of line. To try and defuse the situation, he even went out of his way to be generous. He offered to pay for the nearest hotel room so SIL and her girlfriends could have the weekend getaway she was so desperate for. It was a completely reasonable solution. She would still get her alone time, and we could still host our family gathering as planned. But of course, that wasn't good enough for her. She insisted on staying. She didn't want a hotel. She wanted my house, and she wanted it on her terms. At this point, I am not even surprised anymore. I am just ready to retaliate. She isn't a victim here. In fact, she is knowingly being entitled, manipulative, and completely disrespectful. Update 3. At this point, I've had enough. SIL wants to act entitled? She wants to act like my own house isn't mine to control? Fine. I have decided to take the petty route. I called up the police on her. I calmly informed them that someone has broken into my property. Because that's exactly what it is: trespassing. SIL has no right to be there, and since she refuses to leave even when Richard offers to pay for a hotel, I have no reason to keep playing nice. After the phone call, it didn't take long before the police showed up at the vacation house. And, as expected, the moment they arrive, I get a furious call from my sister-in-law. She is screaming at me, demanding that I tell the officer she has permission to be there. But I don't do it and remind her that she, in fact, does not have my permission. I calmly tell her that she has repeatedly ignored my boundaries, that she has been warned before, and that this is entirely her own fault. She tried to argue, tried to play the victim, but none of it mattered. The police didn't take long to make their decision. She and her friends were arrested for trespassing. I don't feel bad at all. Not one bit. Because at the end of the day, I gave her every chance to respect my space. But she took my generosity for granted and treated my family's home like her personal property. Well, now she knows that I'm not playing around. My husband had no idea about what I had done until he got a frantic call from his sister, sobbing and screaming for him to bail her out. She was hysterical, acting like I had committed some unforgivable crime against her. She kept crying about how she couldn't believe I would go to such extremes over something so trivial. When Richard got home this evening, he immediately tried to talk to me about it. He wasn't outright angry, but he was definitely overwhelmed. He said that he could have convinced her to leave eventually if I had just waited a little longer. But I wasn't having it. I looked him straight in the eye and told him exactly why I did what I did. His sister had repeatedly ignored my boundaries. She had time and time again shown up at my property without asking. And this time, she went as far as demanding that we change our plans for her just because she had a 1-month breakup. I asked him point blank, what kind of grown adult acts like this? Who in their right mind thinks they can just take over someone else's home and then throw a tantrum when they're told to leave? I made it very clear to Richard that I was not a pushover. I had been more than patient with her before because I considered her family. I let her get away with her behavior multiple times, despite my frustration. But this was a line crossed, and she needed to learn that her actions have consequences. I told my husband that if his sister was crying about how unfair this was, then maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call she very much needed in life. She had treated my kindness like a given, something she could take advantage of whenever she pleased. But now, she would finally understand that I was not someone to be disrespected. I told him flat out, it's time she learned her lesson. And I expected him to back me up on this. Because at the end of the day, she was his sister, but this was my house. And I was done playing nice. And just to make sure there are no more surprises, I've already decided that I'm going to be changing the locks tomorrow. No more access. No more unannounced visits. No more treating my house like her personal vacation resort. SIL can throw all the tantrums she wants. She can cry about how unfair this is. But at the end of the day, I refuse to let it happen again. Update 4. Despite all the chaos with my sister-in-law, my husband and I still went ahead with our annual family get-together just as planned, and it was amazing. My dad, grandfather, and cousins all showed up, and we spent the whole weekend reminiscing, laughing, and celebrating my mom's memory. This was what the house was meant for, family gatherings filled with love and respect, not someone treating it like a free hotel. Richard and I also had a long conversation about everything that had happened. He admitted that at first, he was taken aback by how far things escalated between me and his sister, but after thinking it over, he realized that I had done the right thing. He saw how his sister had ignored my boundaries over and over again, and he understood why I had finally put my foot down. He even agreed that changing the locks was the best decision. There was no way we were ever dealing with this again. But of course, SIL wasn't done making a spectacle of herself. A few days after she got out on bail, she ran straight to social media and wrote a long, dramatic post about how I had betrayed her and gotten her arrested over a trivial misunderstanding. She painted herself as this struggling family member just trying to find peace, while I, the cold-hearted villain, had her thrown in jail without mercy. She was clearly hoping to gain sympathy and have people rally behind her. And at first, it seemed like her plan was working. Some of her distant relatives and our close family friends began commenting in support of her, calling me cruel and heartless for treating family this way. They were acting like I had just kicked out a poor, helpless woman for no reason. However, I wasn't about to let her twist the truth to make herself look like a victim. So I calmly wrote my own post with every single detail. I laid out the full story: how I had given her a key out of kindness, how she had ignored the one simple rule I had asked of her, how she had repeatedly shown up without permission, trashed my house, and even tried to demand that I move my plans to accommodate her. And most importantly, I made it crystal clear that I had warned her multiple times before I ever involved the police. That was all it took. The moment people read my side, the tide completely turned. One by one, people who had supported her started backtracking. The comments shifted from sympathy to disbelief toward her. Even some of her original supporters started calling her entitled and saying that she was 100% in the wrong. Some even said that I had been too nice for letting her get away with it for so long. Suffice to say, she got obliterated in the comments. Now, SIL has gone completely silent. She thought she could spin the narrative in her favor, but all she did was expose herself even more. As for me, I'm completely at peace. My family gathering was a success. My husband is fully on my side. The locks are changed, and everyone now knows exactly what kind of person she is. Update 5. It's been 2 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. As expected, SIL's case did go to court because I continued pressing charges. She tried to play the victim, but at the end of the day, trespassing is trespassing. Since this was her first offense, she got off with just a petty fine, which honestly, was more mercy than she deserved. Since then, she has not dared to speak to me. Not a word. No fake apologies, no attempts at playing nice, just radio silence. And honestly, I prefer it this way. But what's even more interesting is how this whole thing has affected her relationship with Richard. They've always been extremely close, but right now, things are rocky between them. She fully believes that Richard should divorce me for what I did. She's convinced that I ruined her life and that he should have never taken my side. She genuinely thinks that she's the victim here and that he should be cutting me off, not her. But Richard has straight up told her that she was the one who crossed the line, she was the one who ignored my boundaries, and she was the one who got herself arrested. He reminded her that I warned her multiple times before I took legal action, and instead of respecting my home, she decided to push her luck. Needless to say, SIL didn't like hearing the truth. She thinks her brother has betrayed her by not blindly supporting her, and now their relationship is strained. She's basically angry at him because for the first time in her life, he's not enabling her behavior. At this point, I don't even care. If she's mad that Richard chose to support his wife instead of his entitled, trespassing sister, that's her problem. Not mine. I'm just glad this entire drama is over, and I can finally enjoy my vacation home without worrying ever about unexpected, unwelcome guests.